Of course, there's a lot that goes into ranking websites, especially in this day and age, but these days, these are the essential ones. These are the ones that are really going to get the needle moving. Hi, this is Matt Diggity from Diggity Marketing, and right now I'm going to be going over 5 essential SEO tactics for ranking websites in 2020. And I would call these the 80-20 of ranking. Now, my first SEO tip is to hit all the subtopics when it comes to writing your content. Now, what do I mean by that? If we think of Google's ultimate goal is to serve up the ultimate answer to the query the searcher is looking for. And if someone is searching for how to lose belly fat, for example, you want to make sure you're covering all the subtopics that are required to answer this complete query of losing belly fat. So that might include how to avoid trans fats and how to get some exercise and all these other subtopics. So my piece of advice is to look at the other people ranking on page 1 and look at their subtopics on the page. These are easy to find. You simply have to look at their H2s and their H3 subheading sections and see what are these things titled. Make a list of these for the number 1 ranker. Make a list of them for the number 2 ranker. Make a list for the number 3 ranker. Now you have a complete list of subtopics that it takes to require to answer that query. Now you start writing your piece of content based on being the superset of all these subtopics. And now that you've figured out the basic outline and structure of your document, of your piece of content by looking at the subtopics, now we get into actually writing it. My second piece of advice would be you need to include the entities that Google is looking for in this particular article in order to rank it. Now, what are entities? Entity is a fancy NLP, natural language programming term, which basically defines a person, place, thing, or event. Think of them like nouns, right? So when Google's algorithm is trying to determine whether or not a piece of content is related to a query, they're looking to see what kind of words are showing up in this content and how frequently. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky, but check it out. When you're doing keyword research, let's say I'm trying to rank for DIY lawyer in New York City, right? Okay, so I'm doing keyword research and I find I need to include words like attorney, like DIY law, like DIY lawyer in New York City, all these different variations of NYC lawyer and all that types of stuff. But Google's expecting to see other related words showing up in that content that don't necessarily have search volume. So you might need to include the word court. You might need to include the word judge. You might need to include the word hearing in order to successfully cover the topic of DIY law in New York City. So again, how do we find these entities? Well, thankfully, there's a lot of good software out there that helps you look at these type of things in a nice reported fashion. So I use Surfer SEO for this. But also on top of that, you can use Google's actual NLP API and reverse engineer the people ranking in the top positions. That's the thing with SEO in 2020. The answer is always on page 1. You just need to see what the other people already did to get into these positions, and then you do the same thing. Now, my third piece of advice, which also revolves around content, is word count and length of the document itself, right? So when you're writing a piece of content, it doesn't necessarily mean whoever wrote the longest piece of content is going to win the race. If you're simply answering something like, what is the best microphone for YouTube, you probably don't need a 20,000 word article. So there's a sweet spot that Google is starting to reveal patterns over. And again, big surprise, the answer is already on page 1. You can look and see the number 1 ranker has this many words, number 2 has this many, number 3 has this many. Let's take the average and then we'll do a little bit more than that and just simply blend in with what page 1 is doing. Now let's move on to backlinks. Here's a hypothetical question. Let's say I was trying to rank for the keyword, what is the best protein powder? What do you think is the better backlink to get in order to try to rank for this kind of query? Would it be from a link from New York Times, which is obviously a pretty powerful domain, very authoritative, established, trusted domain, or a link from bodybuilding.com, which is not as much authority as New York Times, but it's more relevant. It's on the topic of protein powder and bodybuilding, all that kind of stuff. Which one do you think is better? Well, sorry, it's a trick question. The answer to that is the guy who is ranked number 1 for protein powder, best protein powder already, that is the best place to get a link from. Because Google has already decided that this is the most authoritative and relevant piece of content on the internet for this topic. So here's what I do. I look and see for every keyword I want to rank for, I look at the top 30 rankers, and these are my first targets for getting backlinks. If I can't get these, then I look at see who is linking to them, and then I get those. And my last piece of advice is to make your website as fast as possible. Now this has been a requirement for quite a long time because Google has been very vocal about how important it is for your website to load fast, not only on desktops, but definitely on mobile as well, as the number of mobile users increases over time. But on top of that, just simply having a faster website increases your own conversions, improves user experience, people will bounce from your website less and less, which all results in better conversions and better rankings. It's within your best interest to make your website as fast as possible.